And welcome. My name is Carol Carter, and along with Celeste Gardner, we're here to welcome you from the Global Minded community of inclusive leaders. Our mission is to create a capable, diverse talent pipeline to get more underrepresented first-gen to college, students of color, and women into the education, economic mobility, and leadership pipeline. We're delighted today to have some incredible inclusive STEM leaders with us for what we're calling the Courageous Conversations, Catalyzing Change in STEM. Some of you have joined us for Catalyzing Change in Tech. We have higher ed session happening tomorrow. And these are really provocative sessions where we are looking at real issues that we need to address in the most forthright way to really be able to close the equity gap, especially during COVID-caused crises and the kinds of things that we've been going through in 2020. So today's session, led by Tol Massey, who's our STEM inclusive equity leader, is called Failure is Not an Option. Inclusive Leaders Tackle STEM Barriers Exacerbated by the 2020 Multiple Crises. And it's my pleasure to hand the session over to Tol. Tol and your panel, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Carol. Thank you for that introduction. So I am Tol Massey. I am the founder and executive director of the Jekyll Foundation for STEM Education. And our mission is to embrace the uninitiated child and change the face of technology forever. I also am the founder and chair, I like to call myself chief visionary of A&M Innovative Solutions, where I use my engineering background and Six Sigma Black Belt background to support organizations in closing the gaps that they may have across a multitude of issues and the like. Today, I'm so excited, and more about me comes out as we're just talking. So I'm just so excited to have this team, distinguished team with me this afternoon, and I'm going to introduce them, take a little time to introduce each of them really quickly, because we want to delve right into what it is that the topic suggests today. So on the panel with me today, and I'm going to read straight from the bio, some of you may have it in front of you, Christina Korp. She is the CEO and executive producer for Purpose Entertainment. I'm going to read it just as it is, Christina. With a record of success in driving growth of organizations through innovative marketing strategies, Christina performs through innovative marketing strategies. Christina performs in multiple industries on a global stage, including multimedia, entertainment, education, and aerospace. The Aldrin Family Foundation, she was the COO, Chief Operating Officer. She oversaw business development, educational programs, partnerships, and licensing and marketing within the organization. A vet of the entertainment media industry. I just learned that she actually sang in a band. She created global marketing campaigns such as Destination Mars and Generation Mars product lines. Welcome, Christina. We also have Lieutenant Colonel Paul Deaderick. Paul Deaderick is retired. He's a senior project leader right now for the Aerospace Corporation. Paul is an analytical intelligence, space operations, and engineering professional with over 20 years of diverse operations and technical knowledge across complex government and commercial aerospace, internet technologies, and communications infrastructure, construction management. He is a transformational leader skilled in implementing strategies that ensure efficient use of resources, improve productivity, reduce cost, and deploying technologies with strategic enterprise goals. And I think it was that background that might have gotten us connected, because when I was still in aerospace with Raytheon, absolutely. We also have Dr. Clay Gloster coming to us from North Carolina. He's the Dean of Graduate College, North Carolina A&T, which is a distinguished historically Black college and university. He's in that system. Clay's research interests are in reconfigurable computing, Current research focuses on the development of a software suite that allows scientists to benefit from a potential order of magnitude speed up in execution time offered by reconfigurable computers over typical desktop computers. Dr. Gloster has also conducted research in the area of technology-based curriculum development, distance education, and VLSI design for testability. So it's very relevant in this space right now. I'm sure you're using quite a bit of your tools. We also have Dr. Tim Podkul. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly, Tim? Podkul?
Podkul, yes, thanks.
Podkul. Director, Principal Research Scientist, SRI International. Tim is an applied anthropologist by training. His specialization is in mixed methods research design with a theoretical, with a theoretical and methodological, stop it. This is what happens when you're reading off your phone, methodological expertise in social capital and social network analysis. Tim's current research focuses on modeling social relationships in informal and formal settings that facilitate knowledgeable sharing and engagement in interest-driven learning. He currently serves as an instructor for the National Science Foundation funded workshops on social network analysis and as an advisor for several research projects. Finally, last but not least, my mentor, the one who keeps me getting up and going forward every day, Dr. Calvin Mackie, founder and CEO of STEM NOLA. Calvin is the founder of STEM NOLA, an organization created to inspire and engage members in surrounding communities about the opportunities in science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM. Lieutenant Governor Landry appointed Dr. Mackie to Louisiana's Council on the Social Status of Black Boys and Black Men, where he is leading the state's effort to create policy and programs to positively impact the quality of life for Black males and families in the state of Louisiana and across the nation. And I'm adding that last part because right now you are absolutely involved in programming in several different states as it may be. Welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you're here today. And we're gonna get right into it. Failure is not an option. We wanna look at the impact and the exacerbation of the impact COVID-19 has had in this STEM space. And we want to look at how it has, and in order for us to really make a, look at, how it is impacting us now, how it has embellished some of these areas of concern, these disparities that exist today, we need to first consider what it looked like even before COVID hit. And that's why we're talking. And some of this conversation is going to require we stretch a little bit and we allow ourselves to be a little uncomfortable in some of these spaces. You were specifically selected because one, you're authentic in this place, you are supporting change in this place, and you understand that it's not an easy landscape to actually tackle. And you're comfortable with the discomfort, if you will. So let's talk about it. Prior to COVID-19, communities that are considered heavily underserved and undersupported have recognized disparities across the educational landscape with respect to access, with respect to support. And that support and access comes in various ways. If we're talking about rural communities and some of the more economically disadvantaged communities in the country, we're often talking about slow to no internet speeds or access. We're often talking about funding models that intend to support those communities, but don't always make their way to those communities. And we talked about that prior to us coming on board. We know that that does indeed exist. In some ways, COVID has supported an awareness that, let's say, those who are in positions of power and access have been allowed or been able to ignore with respect to those communities that have not had these equitable systems in place. Now with this, COVID is like this reset button. Everybody had to sit down at the same time. And there was no escaping the realities that those communities may have always felt and those other communities may have been able to ignore. And now we can't do it any longer. We've got students. Let's talk about how this impact has served in the educational space right now. And this will be interesting for Dr. Gloster, Clay, if you could talk about it, and Calvin, you talk about it, Dr. Mackie. Prior to COVID, what types of constraints were you finding you might have had in order to reach those communities, either pulling them into the HBCU system, North Carolina A&T system, coming into the STEM disciplines? And Calvin, you get them before we hand them off to Clay there. What kind of constraints were you having even before then, before COVID?
Well, I'd like to start off our discussion in saying that there has been gross inequities over the years in terms of funding our historically Black colleges and universities and minority serving institutions. And so those lack of inequities have sort of fueled the fire, if you will, in terms of not allowing us to make progress as a nation in terms of bringing more students from underrepresented groups into STEM disciplines. And I mean, I've been in this situation for many years. I was a student who benefited from the money that the United States government sort of invested in trying to identify African-American students who would pursue careers in STEM. And I've watched government agencies fund special initiatives to increase the number of underrepresented minorities in STEM disciplines. But it's sad to say that COVID has been like a lifting of a blanket, if you will, so that we can see these inequities close and up close and personal. And I tend to think that the digital divide that existed is still prevalent.
Right.
And I think it's, in my opinion, it's the United States government has invested billions and billions of dollars over the last 20 years to try to increase the number of students from underrepresented minority groups in STEM disciplines. And we're still 30 years later.
In the same place. In the same place. Absolutely. Yeah, the needle has seldom and slowly moved. Come on in here, Calvin, and talk about that a little bit.
Great. Toy, you said that COVID was a great reset. And Clay talked about how we had to look at this in up close and personal. And that has always been the case. I mean, I remember in 1999, we were talking about Y2K, and we was talking about the information superhighway. And I remember saying that if we're not careful, many children in the rural areas and the urban areas are gonna end up as sign-carrying hobos on the information superhighway because nobody was building on and off ramps in their communities. So now we're acting like we shocked 20 years later when they built the super information highway. They didn't build on and off ramps for low income, low resource communities. And now they don't have access. And this isn't new to us. I mean, people saw when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005. I'm just saying that all of America now is getting their Hurricane Katrina, and they're getting to see the underbelly that we tried to avoid by living in the suburbs and putting up billboards and bubblegum fences and driving down to the buildings downtown without realizing that this is the world that we live in. So we can't play like we don't know it anymore. I just released a letter here in New Orleans because in the aftermath of George Floyd, all of these technology companies was releasing these statements about we are now listening. It's been less than 90 days. I want to know if they're still listening because my phone still hasn't rung. And people just try to play the games to get to the other side, to just go on back to normal.
I think it happened. Go ahead, finish, Calvin.
I mean, these inequities didn't start last year. Like
not.
Clay said, I mean, historically Black College and Land Grant College with the Morrill Act of 1890, they've been historically underfunded for over 100 years. And that can go all the way back down to legislators to urban and rural education. And just let me end with this, because as a STEM person, we want to talk about STEM and what we need to be doing from an education standpoint. But right here in the state of Louisiana, we are looking at the rural areas and how they don't have access to high-speed internet. Now they don't have this and they don't have that. And what we refuse to do as a people, what we refuse to do as leaders, is trace those inequities back to policy votes that people made, such that when we had the last governor and the former president, came out with the American Reinvestment Act and offered these states billions of dollars to put E-rate, high-speed internet in a lot of rural areas, and their politicians said, we don't want it, and turned the money back to the government, and now their people are suffering from it. So we got to call a spade, call a thing, and people are experiencing inequities because many of the times the leaders that represent them didn't represent them in their best interest.
And sometimes I think that's not by accident. You know, it's more by design. Todd, talk about that for a second. Tim, I'm sorry. You shared with us how in this reset, in this, forced sit down, if you will, finally, some of those in position to release these millions and billions of research dollars are finally looking and saying, hey, we need to rethink how we've been deploying this grant money because it's not moving the needle that Clay described. It's not impacting the very communities that those dollars are intended to reach. We just keep looking at the same people receiving the money. Those of us with the boots on the ground are still doing it with, chitlin dollars. And the filet mignon is not reaching our communities. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure, thanks, Toy. And I think building off of what Clay and Calvin mentioned is really critical here, because I think we've seen what has been funded and hasn't delivered through everything that we've experienced over the past 9 months in particular. And so if there is a silver lining here, I think hopefully we can see what isn't working. I think what we're also seeing is that it's not just about these stovepiped funding initiatives that really help people achieve what they need to achieve at the institutional level, at the systems level, at the individual level, program level. To Calvin's point, what we're not seeing is funders learning across initiatives, right? I mean, we've got health initiatives, we have NIH doing certain things right now, CDC with COVID, but that's not speaking to folks who are tackling food insecurity, to folks who are tackling issues of education, to workforce training, to telecommunications projects that are funded by the public sector. And really what we need to do is figure out, why does funding this little particular slice of a project getting all kids laptops? Why doesn't that work? And what are some of the other systems level issues that make that funding ineffective? And how do we look at this more holistically? And I think this is a really big opportunity, I think, because we're able to see how vast those disconnects are between different funding mechanisms and the communication between those folks who have so many resources, and really how to weave those together.
To Calvin's point, I think what he was saying, this is cyclical in these communities that are underserved and undersupported. every 25, 30 years, some event happens, some tragedy takes place, and there's an awakening, maybe of empathy, maybe of shame, maybe of embarrassment, maybe of just feeling bad. And the thought is we can throw dollars at it. And then it goes away. And then it goes away.
Can I make a comment?
Please.
So I grew up in South Dakota. I'm one of 10 kids. That's my background is I am part Oglala Sioux. And so I am very aware also of different people of color who come from rural areas that do not have the access and resources. I ran the Aldrin Family Foundation and Aerospace Foundation. And we weren't a big, and they're still running, by the way. We weren't a big foundation, but we had a big name behind us. And it was still extremely difficult to get money into our foundation. And so that's something that I realized is there is a system, and Carol actually said it the other day, almost like a clique, that the same people keep getting millions and millions of dollars for programs that are not delivering. And so that's a problem too, is because there's this, I don't know, people want to give money to the same old organizations over and over. Meanwhile, we were a foundation that actually did real tangible things with real kids. And it still was really hard to convince, the people who funded things to give us money. So that's a problem of breaking that system of how they decide who to give money to as well. So that's something, as from my point of view of having to raise money for a foundation, that's another frustrating thing when you're a small foundation trying to do something really good and you just can't seem to convince people to give you the money.
So let's go into that a little bit, because I beg to, I dare to state it has probably more to do with who you're really going to serve versus the size of your organization. When I look at organizations, and there's several of them that talk about supporting girls in STEM, I don't see the girls that look like me in those marketing campaigns, on those websites. When I see organizations talking about, and when you're in the under the category of the minority, you have to be very careful that you're not pitted one against the other. And so, instead of dealing with African American males, we'll deal with Latino males, and we can still say that we are serving the Black or brown people, And so you're in marketing at the highest levels. The importance and the impact of who we are in these spaces must show up in these campaigns. They must be on these webpages. And I can tell you, and you all tell me, Paul, I'll let you speak. When an organization says we're all about inclusion, and I can go to your website and I don't see.
Before you go to Paul, I just want to pipe in on that too, because as you can see, I've got the moon behind me. And so I'm very active in the aerospace community. And meanwhile, NASA right now is promoting Artemis, which is the next mission.
Yeah, very much so.
And it's supposed to be the first woman on the moon. And yet I tell everybody, but every single announcement that they make about Artemis is a room full of white guys. And so, they all say they want to get women and people of color and excited, and it's part of this. And yet how could people feel excited when that's what they see every time? How do they feel like that includes them if that's what they're seeing? So that has to change too.
We're not missed. Calvin and I supported a panel a couple of months ago at the height of this COVID quarantine, and we were talking about that very thing. Everybody's not at the table. It's one thing to be missing from the table. It's a whole nother thing not to even be missed. Like you say, you're talking about, Artemis and putting a woman on the moon, yet there's no women at this table. I hail from Aerospace. So Paul, I'm gonna let you take it from here, because I
think you guys bring up some good points. I'm not sure if I have any answers, so maybe I'm jaded in that it is what it is. But let me talk about it from a broader scale, in that I know when I want to talk to any kids about STEM, as far as the amount of STEM degrees that we're producing or people getting involved with STEM, the numbers are dwindling no matter who you're talking about. And so it gets even worse when you talk about the minority community. And then I think as a result of the programs and the funding that you guys, that we're all seeing, and people don't get trained, then after high school and let's say college, companies are looking for qualified applicants, but they can't find them, or at least that's what they say, right? And so we're X'd out of the game.
Yeah, you come.
We're
Yes.
X'd out of the game well before we even start, right? And so then they go, well, we just can't find some of these people. So, I think for me and where I've come from is, how do I get people interested in STEM? Like you were saying, Toy, I think my high school counselor would be very surprised where I ended up, because, what we look at as far as an engineer with the pocket protector and that, well, engineers are all types of people, and they can be very cool, right? They can be surfers, they can be et cetera. So I think a lot of times when we look at, I think the other kind of weak link are counselors, because counselors don't know about the STEM fields. And so when they try to lead kids on where they should go, they go with what are the,
I know what you're saying.
they know,
But
instead of what
here's
is
the danger
possible.
in that, Calvin, I
No,
know
no.
where you're going. The danger in that is our children have always been redirected away
Yes.
from going into those spaces. And I think as women, as people of color, as allies in this fight, we should never allow anyone to say to us, we can't find them. Because
Right.
that's crap. That's always been crap. One of
Yeah.
the reasons I left Aerospace as executive director was because of that. I was like, I'm gonna have to go get the kids because they're there and they've always been there. Calvin, I cut you off. Go.
No, I mean, it blows my mind, right? We have 330 engineering colleges in America. We have over 3,000 colleges in America. We have over 500 colleges with football teams in America. And I've never heard a college saying they couldn't find a Black athlete or a brown athlete.
Never.
The NFL and the NBA never have a workforce development problem. It's not by accident that kids know that Oprah is a billionaire, that Jay-Z is a billionaire, that Michael Jordan is a billionaire, but they don't know Robert Smith. So the bottom line is that this country understands Black culture enough to codify it and market it and sell it in a way that they want. When we start talking about culturally responsive stuff to get the outcomes that we need from a human development standpoint, all of a sudden nobody understands. No, the problem is that those companies that otherwise claim they can't find us are the same companies going out hiring women, Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans and putting one in a corner or one over here and paying them well. So then they can get out there and then justify why their company is giving Clay at North Carolina A&T $250,000 and then go 50 miles away and let's say give Georgia Tech or North Carolina State $5 million when Clay is producing 10x Black engineers a year. So if it was about merit, and if it was about outcome, and if it was about results, then the money from these companies will follow the people that's making the results. The same thing with the National Science Foundation. I was a professor for 12 years. If this thing was about merit, the same thing that happened at National Science Foundation, they promote people from doing research. They put them in these positions to give out grants, and then they look to fund themselves. So if they go in there with a mindset that Blacks can't do it, they go in there, we have literally, what I am doing in New Orleans, Paul is working with something, Tim is working with something called Includes. Mm-hmm. We are doing Includes. Every grant that we have put our model in, the results have come back and say they're too advantageous. No, your expectations of us is so low that you don't think that we can achieve what we are achieving. So they go out and they give the money, usually to white people with no lived experience, with no expertise, but with an idea about Black and brown and Native communities. And for 20 years, they sit back and say, oh, that didn't work. And I'm speaking from 25 years of experience. I can get the reports for you. I can point it out to you. NSF know this. They're gonna have a panel about it probably in about 30 days. And then they're gonna write a report about it. And then 5 years later, they're gonna say, well, that didn't work because they gave the money to the same people, the same university,
on the show.
the same little minority program.
And that's the continuous rhetoric and the incessant outcome that we see, you know, and that's what frustrates us, because we know we're dealing with genius. We know we're dealing with the brightest. We know that the quality of life that most Americans and people around the world enjoy has a lot to do with inventors that looked like us, who out of need created these things from the light switch to you know, the spark plug on a
Yes.
car to, and your president who golfs all the time, the very tee that he you know, tees off on. But we are not presented in these spaces, and some of that is our fault, I will say. And let's talk about that a little bit. That funding space, what do we do? What is our solution space in here? And Tim, you might be able to help us redirect how we're doing this thing, because we're very confident in who we are and what we're turning out. It's just a continuous slap in the face when we see the chair of Wells Fargo stand up and say on national and international television, well, we can't find them, you know, and it's like, are you kidding me? In aerospace, imagine, I was usually the only one that looked like me. And I'm usually with what I called old white leadership, the owls, and having to navigate that space in authenticity, you know, making it very clear I'm missing from this table. And so therefore you don't have a complete solution. In fact, my community is usually receiving the negative outcomes from your output, and because we're not here. So let's talk about, how do we close this gap? It's even in that achievement space. And they talk, which I think, in Calvin and Clay, you're in the education space as well. You know, and Christina, you work with the children that you've been working with. When we talk achievement gap, it's usually not about aptitude. It's usually about access and time on task.
But
I
wanted to comment that you were saying you were the only woman, you know, and you were willing to speak up. You know, I know female NASA astronauts. They're astronauts who are African-American women who have said to me, I am afraid to speak up. I am afraid to like rock the boat, because basically that is a threat to my job security, which is terrible, you know. And they said, maybe we need to start speaking up more. So even in those, you know, places where you think, wow, they're an astronaut, they're powerful, they still are not confident that they can speak up and have a voice the way that they should. And partially too, because, you know, the African-American astronauts that I know, the women especially, they're not promoted very much. I mean, a little bit now, ever since Hidden Figures came out, all of a sudden these incredible women who helped, you know, basically ensure that John Glenn could come back to Earth safely. We would not have gone to the moon without those women. And so thankfully, you know, that movie did come out. That was Pharrell Williams who produced that. So having more people like that, as representation matters. You know, it's that cliche of a phrase, but it is true. And so the hard part is, you know, there are people who've made it to certain levels, but even at those stages, they're afraid of how it will impact their jobs if they speak up about it. You know, so we even need to. I've
never been afraid to walk away.
Yeah, but some of them made it to that place.
I got a going through engineering now.
But Toy, some of them made it to that place.
Never be afraid to walk. Go ahead, Tom.
But some of them made it to that place because they did not speak up. I got friends who are colleges or universities now. They're deans of engineering. And look, and I'll be honest with you, and I say it all the time, right? I said, you know, I would be working with a university and they promote a Black person to the dean of the presidency, and I don't get to work anymore because they're afraid of how it's gonna look if they bring me in. And so when we talk about courageous conversation, there's a string of cowardice that runs through these positions where people are more committed to their self-sustaining promotion of themselves rather than changing things. So it's like, I'm not gonna sacrifice myself or challenge the system so we can get the Black representation. That's why diversity is important, but we don't get the inclusion, meaning I'm at the table participating, because they really, I mean, it's the inclusion where the thing's gonna happen. I should be able to sit at the table and speak my piece. And I know people looking at me like I'm crazy, And that's why I started.
No,
I was in the
No.
academy for 12 years, spoke up. And when I had a chance, I just walked away. The hell with it. Nothing was going to change. And I was committed to changing. And now we're winning multi-million-dollar grants because of what we are doing. But most so, I still had to take 100,000 of my own dollars and seed it because people who was funding things, I didn't present myself in a way. I wasn't with a big white institution. I didn't say in total line. So therefore, I can't deal with you.
Yes, we need to speak up. Yes, you're right. We need to speak up. I think if you pardon my analogy, we need a George Floyd incident in higher ed to change the formula of funding because what's been going on has not moved the needle. It has not made any difference. I was looking at the Inside Higher Ed article a few days ago, and it says the rich colleges keep getting richer. We need to have outcomes-based funding. How can you say you're moving the needle in STEM when you're not engaged with some of the largest institutions that have the largest number of underrepresented minorities at the institutions? How can you say that you're moving the needle when you're publishing strategies for improving the environment, right? And you're not including the large population of underrepresented minorities. I mean, something has to change now. It's ludicrous, and like you said, some of us we move up in our positions, and we're afraid to have these courageous conversations about what needs to happen. But business as usual is not the answer. We need to rethink, reshape, and it's a cycle, right? Because those institutions get more money, right? And the institutions that need the money that could have the largest impact don't have the funds to hire outstanding faculty to teach those students again, and the cycle continues. And so then the agency can say, well, we don't want to fund this institution because they're not doing state-of-the-art work. And so we have to break the cycle. All of us is a chicken and egg problem, but all of us have had chicken and egg problems that we've solved, right? You had to get a car to go to work, but you need a job to get a car, right? But we actually stepped in and we broke the cycle. So something needs to happen from that aspect in terms of supporting the institutions that have the largest percentage of underserved minorities. 10%.
When you saw, go ahead.
10%. Okay. 10% of students who qualify for Pell Grant go to those large institutions that get most of the funding. 10%.
Well, look at, I'm going to use Calvin's analogy about athletes. If our athletes, who are usually making these other institutions very wealthy, were instead attending HBCUs, those dollars might follow in that space as well. One of the things I wanted, you as you are talking, and please, Tim, Christina, Paul, jump in. When we start to talk about, our absence and this idea that we cannot speak up, I think we need to shift the paradigm and understand that that's one of the reasons why we're there. We don't have to make big announcements. We can move very quietly in these spaces and be very powerful in that same way. But when we talk about disparities in health, right? That means and recognizing, look how COVID affected communities of color in exponentially different ways because of the disparities in health and health care. We know that in Black and Brown communities, we're more compliant with medical orders, if you will, when we are working with doctors and nurse practitioners that look like us, but yet, like you say, they're not coming into these fields. We're not coming into these fields. It's a domino effect. It's a domino effect. And it doesn't have to continue this way. We need to remove the mystery behind STEM and this idea that in order to go into engineering, you got to be extremely bright. You know, you just got to be willing to work hard. If you go into medicine, you got to be extremely bright. I know some really not very bright physicians, but they worked hard. You got to go into these places. And I want you all to talk about that, especially my folks on the panel with the doctorate, the doctoral backgrounds, if you will. We've got to pull these young people and even people returning to school into these fields in order to close that gap. I think some of this and a lot of it might even be our own responsibility. What do you?
So I don't have a doctorate, but I slept at a Holiday Inn. But I want to ask, when we were separate but equal, were things better because we had more people in different disciplines in order to serve the community. And
you really about to shake it up now. Okay.
And the reason why I say that is like, now that I get educated and I get trained, who's going to hire me? And so, if we had maybe more Black companies, would they hire me? Would the Black companies do research and development with Black institutions? I mean, how do I solve this problem? You talked about it. Chicken and an egg, and it's not an easy problem, but what do we do? And then, the other thing that I'm finding out in life, of course, is there's a lot of good white people, Hispanic people, Asian, that want to work with people of all backgrounds and colors. And so, I don't think that separate but equal is the answer. I just look at that and what we set up. But I think we need to find partnerships with people who want that diversity. And we need to seek and find them out, kind of like the Underground Railroad. We need to make sure that people can find the folks that want to do diverse things, want to collaborate. So what do you think?
I wanted to ask you a question because I had a huge meeting at the beginning of the year with Boeing, Lockheed, Northrop Grumman, Sierra Nevada, and I can't think, like all of the aerospace companies. And I was going to try to cover Times Square with life-size spacecraft for National Space Day. This was before, to kind of let people see this is a reality. There are real hardware, real spacecraft being built. And in that meeting, the Boeing guys and the Lockheed guys said, we do not have the next generation workforce. We are desperate for the next generation workforce. We're not even going to college anymore. We're going to high schools, hoping we can convince these kids to come and even be technicians. Like you were saying, you don't need even a degree. You could become a technician and they will train you. And I said to them, yeah, but why would they want to come work for you? They have no idea what you guys are doing. So there's a huge awareness gap too, about what the possibilities are for a lot of people, I think. And especially in the aerospace world, I think there's this arrogance that we're doing big, important things and everybody's just paying attention. And I'm saying to them as a media entertainment person, they don't know. They have no idea that you're building lunar landers. They have no idea that you're building things that they could be a part of. So I think that's where me as a media marketing person, I was trying to say, that's why I thought if I put real spacecraft in Times Square, that will get the world's attention and real people on the ground to see, wow, that's real. That's not science fiction. Plus, I said, as far as I can see, everybody wants to go work for like Silicon Valley. That's the exciting, thing relating to the future. And I don't think that's as exciting as working, as an engineer or a scientist or whatever at NASA or in the aerospace. So you, in the realm that you're in, I just want to relay that to you too, that I think that that's a huge problem is awareness. The space geeks are already on board. You got to get more people aware of the opportunities that are there.
But that's where your marketing piece is so, it is critical, it is crucial, and it is just not to be compromised. But we are deliberately omitted from those spaces. So even when people start to, again, there's this idea, the Juggle's been in place now since we launched our first program in 2014, 2015. We've reached about 6,000 or 7,000 kids, maybe as many as 10 when we partner with organizations like STEM NOLA. And it's me that those kids run up to, and they're just like, I could do this. I had no idea. I call them all doctor. She called me doctor. as opposed to, you know, knucklehead or, you know, whatever the case may be. I call him doctor, one, because I believe when you plant a seed, it takes root and grows. The other, because I can't remember all the names. It's just easier. Doctor.
So
But
Toy,
talk about it, Calvin.
so Toy, I mean, all us on here, and again, I don't like talking about the problems because the problems have been out there and we can rehash
Let's
them
go with the
day in
solution.
and day out. But
Mhm.
I like to talk about solutions, and that's why I'm so
Write it down.
I'm so into this, because I walked away from the university because I'm convinced that the solution in the community will not come from higher ed. All right. I walked away from corporate America because I said I am convinced the solution will not come from corporate America. Now, can they participate? Booker T. Washington said we're separate as the fingers, but as whole as the hand. It's funny. Here in New Orleans, there's another STEM organization, and they ran an ad over the weekend for a camp, and it was, I mean, it was 3 lily white kids, and I sent it to the mayor. I sent it to everybody. I said, here it is in 2020, post George Floyd, racial reckoning. And this organization that's getting funding that we're not. Now, we've engaged 50,000 kids. We're running commercials over the weekend. So, Christina, the marketing piece, I believe the challenge here is the marketing and the awareness piece. And we are engaging kids from cradle to career. We have a pipeline starting with kids at 6 months old. We work with a group called Training Ground from 6 months old to pre-K3 to work with kids and the parents on motor skills and how to engage your kid. Then we work from pre-K4 all the way to 12th grade. Then we engage the college students. Then we engage the STEM professionals. So when we say we've engaged 50,000 plus kids, it is vertical mentoring like you've never seen.
Right.
So the solution is not these little parts, because that's where we get in trouble. That's what NSF want to do. And if they say you need to focus on middle school. And then they say, well, you need to focus on technology. I got a PhD in mechanical engineering. I hate robotics. I hate coding. I hate chemistry. I hate biology. So the bottom line is that we got to expose the kids to the possibility and let them choose. I believe in that.
That's right.
I believe if they get the chance to participate, just like my 2 little privileged black sons, I send them to these little camps. I'll give you another challenge. I'll sit down with funders, and funders will send their own kids to a camp. Let's say a STEM camp, and it's $3,000 a week. On Monday, I'll show up in that person's office, who's now a funder, not a parent, and I say, I'd like to do a camp on this side of town. And they say, great, how much? I said, $3,000 a kid. And they say, well, why does it cost so much? It costs so much because you're now devaluing the kids it's going to. The technology didn't change. What changed, Paul, was the kids that we're delivering it to. So if you have a low expectations for those kids, then you're going to give programs that service those kids like North Carolina A&T less money, and then you'll celebrate yourself like you've done something great. So the separate but equal thing really has worked out for white people. And they show up and they're in all white spaces by themselves, and they never question the fact that no one else is here. They're just very happy that their kids are getting what their kids are getting. So for me, diversity. I run a program and I bring in all the kids. And I've had people say, well, do you think you need more white people? I need more white people for what? I don't see the white people saying, do you all think we need more black people? But I am more, North Carolina A&T is more diverse than most majority white schools. HBCs are more diverse than mostly historically white schools. So no, give me the money and the support that you give other people to support the kids that we are otherwise targeting, and let the chips fall where they may.
He has absolute. Tim, I need you. Talk to me. What list? Because we're talking solutions now. How do we make? I mean, we jump through all the hoops. We do everything that you say we need to do. We present in such a way with both the need and the evidence that we're able to deliver. What more is required for a North Carolina A&T, AT&T, for a FAMU, for a Howard University? These are large institutions, HBCUs that I'm naming, obviously, that have the research capacity. What more do we do to make ourselves attractive to get those dollars so that we can support communities like Christina's?
No,
I'm sorry, Toby, but that question speaks to like something is wrong with what North Carolina A&T is doing.
And that's what I don't want to do. Okay.
As long as we start there, we'll never get to an answer.
No, that's right.
So where do we start?
North Carolina A&T have shown its mettle in producing black kids with engineering degrees. That's another damn thing better.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's exactly right, Calvin. My answer was going to be nothing. What needs to happen is that these organizations and foundations that fund improvements in learning need to figure out how to be learning organizations and learn, Calvin, to your point, where's the inclusion? I think we talk about bringing people into STEM, right? We want more people into STEM, but we don't talk about thinking about how to change the culture of STEM so that it is more inclusive. And I think that's the work that really has to happen until the companies, the funders actually understand this and see that, so my background's in anthropology and spent a lot of time with folks talking about traditional ecological knowledge, which is the way that, local people in certain environments really understand their environment. They have deep knowledge of what can be produced from the resources they have. And that's all information and knowledge that when you look at these large institutions that teach you science, don't teach you any of those things, but it's extremely valuable, it's extremely productive, has led to amazing technological breakthroughs in those communities. And we don't think about those things as we talk about STEM, as we talk about technology. And so bringing that mindset of there's so much to learn, the ways different communities think about science, interact with science, Native communities. I think this is really where we have to turn the lens on a lot of the large organizations and think, what can we do to learn everything that we funded, and not what can all these people that we funded learn how to do better so that they conform to what it is we're trying to have them be.
Would it be of value, and this is almost rhetorical, for us to rethink who's at the grant evaluation table? Because, we know what our communities need more than anybody else does. And usually, like Christina gave that example, we're not at the decision-making table and folks are making decisions about us. And I think to Paul's point, perhaps it was when you were saying, there was a time when I think segregation perhaps was not the worst thing that happened to us, because we were so self-reliant and we really poured into our own excellence and we didn't require someone else to validate us in that space. Talk about that.
No, and I don't want to return to separate but equal, but what I do want to ask is, once I get educated, once I'm there, how do I, when I say get hired, how do I get integrated into that new STEM culture, right? And even if I get hired, maybe I last for 5 years, maybe I last for 10 years. But what I've noticed in different technology companies that I've worked for, when it comes to Black males, you might see some that are in their early 20s and 30s, but let's say 40s and 50s, I think when I say they're weeded out, they are, and they're into other businesses or other things rather than following that corporate structure. So sometimes I ask myself, do I educate myself to work for somebody else, or should I educate myself to work for me? And so I come back to that question on, should we be developing, I'll say, Black companies? And maybe we specialize in a particular area, and then we're producing a piece of the pie. I hear some of your thoughts.
I see someone, Angela DeHart, made a really interesting comment, and I think it's true, and she says problems cannot be solved at the same level by the same people that created the problem. And I think there's some real value to be said about that. And we're talking solutions here. So how do we change that? I was, senior executive in engineering, master's degree in both mechanical and nuclear engineering. And yet I'm the only one that looked like me on the campus where I was when I decided I'm out. I gotta go get my kids if I'm going to see my kids. So how do we close that gap? Calvin's got cradle to career. That plugs in Clay. Paul, you're going to have a responsibility once they graduate to make sure those doors are open. Tim, you're in this alliance place with us. You've got to make these funds available where they really need to be had. And Christina, your work is cut out for you, because we've been underserved and underrepresented on the screens, on the posters, in the ads, and we're here. We know we're here. We know what we produce. When you talked about Hidden Figures, I sat in that movie and cried because I was a hidden figure. That's how I felt. And I remember when my mother, when she was living and I first started my career, I was in aerospace, well, actually, no, I was at that time in nuclear engineering. I was at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. They've been in place for over 40 years. I was the third Black female engineer they had hired in over 40 years. And I remember saying to her, they don't see me. It's like I'm invisible. I'm the only one. And she says, what do you mean you're the only one? I said, I'm the only Black. I'm the only woman. She said, that's showtime. If you're the only one, that's showtime. And that's some of the paradigm. She said, dress like the boss before you are the boss. You know, always have a question. Early is on time and on time is late. And those types of wisdom, that mother wit that navigates us in those spaces that aren't always comfortable and receiving of us. We train our kids to go into these places, but we don't train these places to receive our kids. And that's why retention is so low. Recruitment might be high. How do we close this gap? We need solutions because we're running out of time, and I want to make sure when we walk away from here, we got something on
we
the
offer solutions, right? We offer awareness, right?
Okay,
People
awareness.
UNT is third in the UNC system in terms of funded research
Okay.
consistently over years. So we have to do a better job of letting people know of the capabilities that exist at these institutions. And we have to do a better job of partnering with other institutions to find different avenues for getting additional investments into these communities. And yes, we need economic empowerment in our communities. Yes, we need to train our students not just to graduate and go work for XYZ Incorporated, but to establish their own, create their own companies, create their own research engines, start their
own genius. Yeah.
And I know that kids can do it. I still did a Times Square thing last summer, just so you know, and it was in partnership with the New York Department of Education and their Summer in the City program. And all the kids that came to that event were kids of color. But what I loved was these teams of Black girls who had invented like how to recycle things on the moon. And they had like this incinerator. And I was seeing kids who don't have the resources, but because they had this program and they were able to use their creativity and their thought process, they were presenting real things that they thought up on their own. So I think it's more so like, you know, let's be honest, money does help. I mean, I'm an expert at getting things like donated. I got Times Square donated. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars.
If not millions.
To get an event. I got Duran Duran to play for me for free last year at my gala. Like I can talk people who are like us, who care to donate in-kind donation, but getting cash is hard. Getting real cash to make real impacts, like giving kids devices everywhere and providing internet, that's the hard part. Because I think all of us on the ground want to do things, real things, but there is a point where you need money and there's just no way around.
You gotta have the money. You gotta have the money.
So I'm raising two boys. So this is not academic for me. I have a 10th grader and I have a senior that's applying to college. And my senior that's applying to college, he got like a 35 in math on the ACT, his MIT summer camp. He took machine learning, artificial intelligence to work. And everybody say, well, damn, Calvin, of course, that's your son. I say, well, if LeBron James had summer camps, everybody who wanted their kid to be basketball players would be sending their kids
they would.
to LeBron James camps.
They would.
And all the companies that want to be next to LeBron James, to produce the next LeBron James, they actually partner with LeBron James to support LeBron James camps.
They would.
So, I mean, maybe y'all can follow the logic. So if I got these two Black boys in my house who's going to the public schools in New Orleans and kicking everybody behind, including the kids in their best technical school, including the kids in the private schools in Jack and Jill that otherwise won't go to the public schools. And if I'm running the camp, look like the people who are interested in giving, you understand what I'm saying.
I know exactly what you're saying.
If I played basketball, I bet you Amex, JP Morgan, Exxon, I bet you they'll be lined up to partner with me to sponsor a camp because they believe that my two black sons one day can play in the NBA, NFL.
And
They
the
don't.
return on investment would be theirs. There it is. And so we have a responsibility, all of us on this panel, all of those who are dialed in, to shift this paradigm and put more emphasis perhaps on getting those kids to engineering camps and getting those kids to pre-med camps. And I remember my brother, 12th grade, 11th grade, going into 12th grade, my mother, we sitting around the table and she said, listen, you about to graduate, what's your plan? And he said, well, I was thinking, he's at a Jesuit school. He said, I was thinking that I would just hitchhike across country till I find myself. And I remember thinking, ooh, this not gonna go down well. I just got quiet. My mother was an educator, school teacher, Detroit Public Schools, 35 years. She looked up, she said, but boy, you not lost. She went to filling out all his applications for college. And I was like, why are you doing this? He's supposed to do it. She said, because he got to leave here and he can't come back. He's a practicing physician today. And I told him, if it wasn't for mama, you still be hitchhiking across the country. But we have to be invasive with our children that way. I do programming and it blows me away, you guys, when a parent will say, we'll give them scholarships and Calvin, you might have this happen. I don't know, you better at closing this gap than me. And I'll give a scholarship, but I'll have a parent say, well, let me ask if they want to do it. I'm like, you're going to ask a 12-year-old if they want to get up on a Saturday morning? Who does this and expect the outcomes that we need going forward? So that's part of, I think, our solution space puts back a responsibility on us as parents and community to not only make aware to these students that there are opportunities, but to get them there and to remove from them the option to say no. Y'all talk about that. What do you think? I know all of I know how the Black and Browns were raised. Tim, did your mom tell you if you were going to do something you had no options? Or even Carol, you're on here. I know Clay's mama said, you go in here and I ain't even asking you. Calvin tells his boys, because that's what he was told. Paul, you were told. Christina, you were probably told the same thing. It's cultural in that way. You didn't get
I wasn't. I'm one of 10 kids. We were barely.
But that's why we have to re-educate the whole community. And that's why we built the ecosystem that bring in not only the kids and not only the college students and not only the professionals, but also bring in the parents. I mean, the parents do not know. So we are also not only upskilling, but up-educating the parents so they can make better decisions for their children. So when we start talking about an ecosystem, it just can't be school. If you start at the schoolhouse, you're already lost. You're already done. So when we started what we're doing, we started with a partnership with the community. The community now realize that they have a trusted partner in what we are doing, and they'll listen to us before they listen to the school. And now we are changing the dynamics in the school, because one thing we should learn from politics is that organized people beat organized money all the time. School is just organized money. We've organized the community, so now the community is dictating to the school that if our kids can go to the parks and get robotics, if our kids can go to the park and get STEM, parents are now saying, why are they not getting STEM at school? And now someone has the answer. So my solution is start with the community, cradle to career, and put pressure on the institutions to respond to what the community desires for their children.
Well, and you have to
And I'll
remember.
add a little thing on there as well, that I see it all as concentric circles, Calvin, where it starts with the community. It starts with those circles getting bigger and bigger. And then with Global Minded, it's like, how can we get some of these people to the climate event at the United Nations? And how can we get them to Ronald Reagan Institute in Washington, D.C.? And when these people from the more resource zip codes are sending their kids all over the place and they're traveling the world, we have to be able to do this also for low-income kids, because when their world is bigger, you come back to, Colorado Springs or wherever with that big lens, and they're going to be more innovative. They're going to be able to start the companies. They're going to have the networks to do so. But in the absence of that kind of social capital, you know, people are limited when other people have all kinds of networks and neighbors working at IBM and people doing all these different things that we have got to be able to provide for that. And that's really what the mission of Global Minded is. So I think you are starting that concentric circle has to start in that community with that public school, and then build and build and build so that student has access to those broader networks of experiences too.
It could be homeschool. It could be any avenue of education, but what you're saying is access without support is not opportunity. You must
You got to
have.
remember the overwhelmed parents though too. There are a lot of parents who do not have the time to, like you were talking about, encouraging. I mean, I was one of 10 kids. My parents were they were happy if we brushed our teeth and put our clothes on. Half of us were, at least once a week, one kid got stuck at school, left at school, and we either walked home or they came back and drove and got us. So that's from an extreme case of just a big family. But I know lots of single parents who, like, they're working 2 or 3 jobs and, you know, they're tired. How did they have the energy to sit down and do their homework? I have 2 little kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and we work with them on their homework every night. But not everybody has that luxury, you know. So even helping with that, I think, is a big thing, because it's overwhelming for kids and parents, and especially now that they're at home, you know, trying to teach kids things that they're not.
You know, I guess I have a different take on that.
So we put over $1 million in the hands of college students to support those parents. I agree. I was one of 6. My mom and dad, my dad dropped out of school in grade 8th grade to pick cotton, but we are now training college kids to support those parents in low income, low resource communities. I agree with you 100, Christina. And the parents are like, thank you.
Yeah.
So it goes back again to creating this community with the parent and being parent focused, parent engagement focused, in order to make them aware of the support systems in place. Because you do describe a very realistic scenario. And I think before we go, let's hit on what you were talking about. You saw or read earlier when we're talking about kids that are not even logging on in this COVID space, this you know, virtual learning space, and we've got parents that are working and they're not home, or they, you know, have to rely on a child to make the decision to get up and log on, and we've got kids by the thousands that are just absent, you know, in this COVID embellished space. You know, and those kids are going to be impacted, many of whom already have been struggling with, you know, basic skills and whatnot. So if we're not careful, we create a pipeline that goes everywhere else but to the aerospace industries, to the North Carolina AT&Ts, you know. So let's talk about that before we get off the phone. That's another solution space we got to think about. How do we serve in this current climate? Our reality is these kids are virtual learners. They're tired. They are tuned out, and they are not showing up.
Well, we have to prepare for this generation. The story you're talking about was 60 Minutes, and they were saying that most of the kids were 6 and 7-year-olds, 5, 6, 7-year-olds, because probably the parents thought, I'm just not even going to start them yet. I'm just going to hold off on putting them in kindergarten or 1st grade. So we're going to have a whole generation of kids that are way, you know, behind age-wise. So we need to be aware of that too. The other thing is, like Calvin, what you were saying about, you know, getting college students and that, I mean, that's a wonderful mentorship program that I think if you could duplicate that in a lot of places, because that's the other thing. I think if kids see college age kids who look like them reaching their hand down to try to help them, that's super valuable too. And that's one thing I think that's missing is mentorship a lot in this day and age.
And somebody put in the chat, they talked about retired engineers, retired STEM professionals, retired educators. That's a vastly untapped resource that's available in our community. And I agree with Calvin. We should organize in the community and provide this additional support to those students who need support in school, and maybe they're not getting it from their parents, etc. Because we used to say, you know, it takes a village to raise a kid. And so we need to organize better around the community to provide this support system for our students. There's a large number of students that are homeless. In our schools in North Carolina, there's a large percentage of students who don't have a home. And so go figure what they're doing in the midst of COVID.
You're right. And they don't have access to internet, and they don't have, goes back almost full circle. Calvin, you opened up talking about years ago when this information highway was being, the infrastructure was being laid. It was with intent that some of the most underserved communities remain underserved. They did not get this access to high-speed internet, and we're seeing it right now. The kids aren't able to log on. If you got more than one child that needs to log on, that impacts the ability to use the internet in a particular household. There's all of this. And to Christina's point, these problems can go away, but they will need money. It won't just be volunteers. They will need money to be imposed.
So Christina, we built that model that we believe that's scalable, transferable, and reproducible. We've replicated it in rural Northern Louisiana with the backing of Magic Johnson and Sodexo Magic Company. The model is sustainable because we have built STEM modules that relate to the economic drivers and the value proposition with the companies. The model has been licensed by the University of Illinois, and we were supposed to start STEM Illinois right before COVID. It's been licensed by a group in Minneapolis. We're supposed to start STEM North Minneapolis, right where George Floyd was killed. We just won a $3 million grant from the Department of Defense to replicate this model along the Gulf Coast and through the state of Louisiana.
Awesome.
My point is this. We have built a model that's showing efficacy for organizing the community, allowing retired people to show up, allowing retired teachers to show up, allowing parents, whoever wanted. The problem is not that these people don't want to participate. The problem is that there's not an organized environment with pathways for people to enter. And Carol, yes, we call it these concentric circles. A high functioning community is child-centered, adult governed, elder rule, where the adults are the college kids, the elder are the STEM professionals, the retired people. So everyone has a role to play. And when they show up, everybody played a part. We bring it to the community. So if a kid doesn't have access at home, they can walk down the street to the local facility. We don't have it at the university 10 miles away and say, come get it. So there isn't anything that a kid can need that we are not committed and prepared to deliver to them in this space. And that has to be the answer. It cannot be, even our kits now, we're shipping kits to 34 different states. We got to put vinegar in the kits. We got to put glue in the kits. We cannot assume that if we ship a kid that they're going to have tape at their house.
That's exactly right. And he knows, because that's what we do. And I am now smart enough, because he's a bigger operation than Jekyll. We're here in Denver, and we do the same thing. If we have to assume they have nothing. And now, because Calvin has all of this in place, we are able to even serve more kids, because we just go to the STEM NOLA and say, if I need this, that, and the other. And he's able to supply that for us, and then we're able to ship out that way. And that's part of that village that we're talking about, how to use one another, how to leverage one another and make this happen. It's powerful. And we really do have the tools. And we certainly have the power if we allow ourselves to be empowered. And I know we're getting to the closeout area, but there are about 5 questions I'd love to share with you all from our audience. Angela DeHart had a few of these. She says, what needs to happen? I think we may have answered some of this. What needs to happen in the K-12 system in order for the diversity problem to be addressed in a real way? Christina, you start that one.
Oh, well, I think these guys might have a better answer.
I'm thinking of the visual piece.
Well, I mean, that's partially why, I know that I'm a very visual person. My son, who just popped his head in, is very visual. He's really good at math, but he struggles with language arts. But when he sees it, that's, and I know lots of different learning platforms are trying to do better with that, realizing that kids learn different ways, so I think that that's a big part of it, but also providing different kinds of educational tools, which is why I created, the giant Mars map, giant moon map. So whole teams of kids could do things, interact. Because the other thing is everybody kept telling me, why don't you just create an app? And like you were saying, I was like, first of all, not every kid has a device. Number one. Number two, I don't really want my kid's face constantly in a device. They're already, watching enough screen time. I want them to have a physically interactive thing. So I think that's something to remember too, is that even with this online learning, thankfully my kids are actually still in school, at least for the time being, because we haven't had any cases at our school. But, for the kids that are staying at home, they're not getting physical activity, they're not exercising, they're not playing, they're not doing the things that make them physically learn. So I think that's something we have to remember, because I've got little kids too, and I see how they do when they're at home all day. But I personally want to do whatever I can to raise the visibility of the way that people look. One of my good friends, Regina, is on this, and she's a teacher and her husband's a teacher. They're both African-American, and Regina's getting her doctorate right now in education. And, we talk about this. I mean, she would be a great person to soundboard. I see her smiling there on the chat. But anyway, I mean, it's really important. And she understands my efforts as somebody trying to get people to see it's more than just reading a book. It's more than just curriculum. It's so much more than that. Her son is brilliant. Her son Ellis is extremely intelligent, and he will succeed because he has parents who are teachers who are helping him along. So that's why I love the mentorship program that you have, Calvin, and I'd love to learn more about it, because I think that's critical to having encouragement when they show the interest, to have somebody keep that going. How do you keep it going? That's one of the important elements to me that I think has to happen.
But is some part of this, training folks that don't look like the folks we want to bring in, and helping them to learn?
Well, you know what? I was going to bring up too,
because that's where I'm at in this place.
One more thing I wanted to bring up.
And that's where I'm at.
When we were all in school, didn't we all have a lot of things that I don't think are in school? We all learned home ec, we all learned to shop and pottery and art. And we did guys working and learning how to fix cars and stuff like that, and carpentry. Like that stuff I don't think is in school very much anymore, is it?
And the problem, but no, it's not in many schools. They consider it VOTEC. But we need to make the connection that we got STEM in there. I can take a chef.
But that's what I mean. I think that the other problem is this idea that every kid has to go and get a college degree. Some kids are, I think some people would be served by going to vocational schools more. And I think there has to be more encouragement in that area too.
My idea about that is, if you can get the vocational training while in high school, fine. But I'm gonna quote my mentor who happens to be on the panel. You don't have to get a college degree, but you'll never have the job of the one signing your check without the college degree. So, we have to be careful in that space when it comes to kids of color and what it means not to have the degree.
I understand what you mean, but my friend at Lockheed, like he was saying, we've got these technician jobs. We will train you. We will, and it's a very technical job, but it pays really well, and you don't need a college degree to do it.
No, but you may not ever go anywhere beyond that ground level there. And if you're okay with that, okay. There's few, I grew up in Detroit, and you could actually go into the big three, GM, Ford, Chrysler, and start on the line and end up the CEO like a Lee Iacocca. But those days are over. And so, but
the only reason I bring it up too is because my sister's ex-husband owns a painting company, and he's super wealthy.
I know.
And he's like, here, I've got a job that I make a lot of money, and people look down on people like me now. They look down on plumbers now. They look down on, and those are STEM-related fields.
Those are STEM careers. Calvin, you were gonna say something to that.
The man or woman who doesn't have skills, ask people how much they pay. The man or woman who does have skills, tell people how much they charge. he or she who knows how will forever have a job. He or she who knows why will forever be their boss. Now, my dad dropped out of school in the 8th grade to pick cotton, started a roofing company that employed over 100 people, and he was always the boss. But my daddy knew why. My daddy didn't pick up a hammer and learn how to do a roof and just focused on getting paid X number of hours and being a roofer. I got a book called A View from the Roof, and my whole thing is there's Mr. Trade and Mr. Degree. So I'm saying educate the kids and let them choose. But when we start creating pathways to channel my children and my 2 sons into hourly jobs and not into professions, that's where it stopped for me. So it's a mindset thing. You know, we got to make sure that our kids understand that if they do go and get a plumbing degree, that they can become a master plumber and start a company and make millions doing plumbing. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm not saying to settle. I'm just saying I think that there are pathways to success through those avenues, though, too.
Yeah, I'll say for a guy who started out very humbly as a aircraft technician, education's not a one and done. And so you might go in for one thing, and then life will force you that you need to go and get something else. And I think more kids nowadays will be returning to school for all types of education and training.
I said the other day, Alvin Toffler said the illiterate of the 21st century will not be he or she who cannot read and write. It'll be he or she who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. So the only thing I'm saying is that I am not against the trades or the apprenticeships or whatever, but it is the right mindset to let kids know you can start with a hammer and end up owning a whole roofing company, as opposed to going and get a degree and being a low-level manager for the rest of your life. So
I agree.
Again, I'm all above as long as we having the whole conversation.
Here's a question that might just take us out of here. This was from DeMarc Elisma. Since you are global leaders, if there is such a big gap, it's like he's asking a question, if there's such a big gap in the US, then the gap is even bigger in countries that are predominantly Black. How do we tackle this problem?
And let's have like everyone with 1 minute and then we'll wrap.
Does anybody want to tackle that? Since we're global leader, if we have a gap in the U.S., I think the assumption is historically it may have been relevant. If you got a gap in the US, then you probably have a gap in other parts of the world as well, and that's even bigger. I don't think the United States holds that power anymore in terms of closing, in terms of education or creating skilled workers. You have other countries like Africa, like Denmark, who are actually producing, STEM champions, especially in engineering and aerospace, that, are challenging. In fact, if nothing else, they're coming here many times. I went to, my graduate program was out of Howard, and we had the largest number of international students of any school, and they'd come here. And then they go back home. They come here and get educated, and then they go back home. At Xavier, where I did my undergraduate, they got the Confucius Center there now, and they've got the the pharmaceutical college there, Calvin, and they're sending their students over there. Yeah. And they're sending their students to these HBCUs where they have donated buildings and support, and then those kids get educated and they go back home. So I don't know that they're seeing, relatively speaking, with respect to numbers, the same, gaps that we are here. I'm not sure.
In the UAE, in their new aerospace program that they have, 50% of the engineers are women. And at the Global Aerospace Summit, they had the head of their whole education and aerospace division say that 70% of their graduates were women, engineering graduates. So I asked them why. I said, how are you doing this? And they said, oh, isn't it like that over there? I said, no way, not even close. And they said, well, the government is very committed. It's from early levels of education. So that's a big part of it. They're trying to change their whole culture in that way of education, because they said that they know that the oil is going to be gone. And so they're trying to find ways to innovate and be a part of the future in some way. And so that's where they've dedicated a lot of their energy is into aerospace.
Our paradigm shift needs to come from the top, because historically it has never been about people of color being educated in this country. It's been about people of color being in service roles and not being educated at the higher roles. And so there's no real plan in place, policy wise or otherwise, that has been enforced to see us move into these spaces. And maybe that's some of the struggle that we're still having at this time. I'm going to wrap up. This has been absolutely wonderful. We could do this all day. This is the best team. And we'll have to keep focusing on the solution space. Let's go ahead and get ready to close out. If you want to have some final words, please, let's do a round robin and make it happen. Absolutely.
Yep. And then we'll share with everybody how we're going to travel what's happened today.
So Paul, why don't you, anyone can start. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Who would like to maybe wrap up with a few comments?
I think we hit on a lot of important things. I mean, namely, I think education starts at home. I mean, I can identify with Calvin as far as my kids being around the dinner table. Also, I think when Clay talked about you need a community to help support that concentric circle of everything starting at home. And then I think it's holding our politicians and some of our companies responsible, as far as we're always worried about the president, but really it's who's on the school board that has a lot of power over what happens to us every day. So that's my parting shot.
Excellent.
My comment is real simple. It's along the lines of the rich colleges are getting richer and the poor institutions are getting poorer. We need to be more vocal and change the way we fund institutions of higher education and make the funding more equitable at the state and the federal level. I'm looking, if you will, for maybe a Robin Hood that shows up and takes from the rich and gives to the poor. We need more equity in funding institutions.
Well, and I'll pipe in that my mission is to try to promote awareness and representation. That's really important to me. I know, especially with women and women of color, I've been trying really hard to do projects to elevate and remind people, especially to inspire young women. One big project that I didn't get to happen this year that I really was trying hard, and I had to pass a bill through Congress to make it happen, and I did, but I ran out of time to make it happen, which was to projection map and add women to Mount Rushmore. And I was gonna put Harriet Tubman up there and Sojourner Truth and Ida B. Wells, and along with other women, Native American women, to try to kind of highlight these women from American history that made significant changes, and use that as a way to inspire young people today. Because I think that's, it's hard to break through the noise. It's hard to get people's attention. So if I could make it bigger than life, then hopefully that would get young people to say, wow, who is that? If they don't know who it is, and learn about who they are, and hopefully be inspired by their stories, like I've been inspired by their stories, to try to learn more and find ways that you can try to be, make a difference, at least in your own little circle. So for the people who are watching, if you want to learn more about what I do and want to, help in some way, or get involved with trying to raise awareness, especially about women of color and women in STEM fields, you can go to purposeentertainment.com and learn more about what I do.
My son came home, he was in the third grade, or fourth grade. I said, son, what's your grades? He said, Daddy, I got all A's. I said, that's what I expect of you. He said, Daddy, my friends want to know how I know all this. I said, did you tell them you do this with your daddy in the garage? He said, yeah, Daddy, but my friends need this. He realized right then and there he was exposed to somebody and things that his friends were not. And in his heart of hearts that he must have got from his mom, he really believed that if they were exposed to those things and those people, they'd be just as smart as him. And I realized right then and there, I had just become like everybody else, keeping my time, my talent, and my treasure in my house to my two. And it was very clear to me that my two was going to be all right. But if I want the world to be different, and if I want those homes to be different that we are talking about, other homes ain't growing up with a PhD in engineering in their home. And we got to go into the community and meet the people where they are, with what we have, where they are, and help them get that, which is not enough to say that, okay, my house all right, and that house not gonna be okay. Those of us with resources, those of us with influence, got to go to the people, meet them where they are in their communities, and help them understand the world that's changing every day. It's difficult for us with the PhDs and the degrees. So imagine my brothers, I'm one of 6. And imagine my brothers and sisters who otherwise don't have the education that I do. So we gotta be the community. Go to your community and make a difference.
Tim?
I think the only thing I want to add is I think, as we've been talking today, this idea of systems comes up, and I saw a comment about systems that, when they work in concert can be extremely oppressive, and absolutely need to recognize that, but also recognize that so many of these solutions that we've talked about today really do require the use of systems for good, I think, and really thinking about how do we connect and energize those other components of the system: parent support, community centers support, educational institutions, food service programs. Like, how do we get all of those things working in a good way to do this reinforcement, which, again, like the systems can be the good or the bad. And I'm optimistic that if we think about how to use them for good and not evil, we can get somewhere.
I guess what I would close out and add, it is so amazing to me that we use devices like this every day, that cell phone, and have no idea that an African-American engineer at AT&T was responsible, this internet, that we had African-Americans that started this in support of this in their garage, just like Calvin does with STEM NOLA. But we don't know that the gifts that we use, those videos that we are able to share in our apps, also an African-American female. That my goal in this whole game is to change the face of technology. So when you think engineer, you don't think blonde hair and blue eyes. You don't have to exclude them, but you include those that look more like me. And you understand that innovation is not about creating something new, but about embellishing and improving on something that may already exist. I grew up in Detroit, and there was nothing for a community of kids who wanted to play basketball, but may not have had the luxury of a rim to kick the bottom out of a crate and nail it to the light pole, and then have a basketball rim, or to remove the wheels off of a lawnmower and put it onto a wooden running board and create a steering device, and now have a little scooter. And this is engineering from the least of us, the youngest of us. It's a natural and innate thing. So in this whole space, one of the biggest things I continue to say to kids: first, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. And secondly, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. Never allow anyone to define you. And that's where I think all of us are trying to say in this space. And I love this. We'll see you again next month. Global Minded is responsible for pulling these together. Please give your feedback. Let us know if we, based on the conversations that were happening in the chat room, I'd love to believe we were hitting on some very relevant spaces here.
I think so. And Toy, I think you did a great job. I want to have a couple of other little news items that
go ahead.
Actually for the month of December, we're going to press pause just because we have our Inclusive Leader Awards. And on December 2nd, we are going to have an equity team on foundations and funders, but we figure we got a lot with our students, our first gen students, deliverables with them for December. So we're going to press pause for December, but we're going to be back with Toy and her team and others for January. And we will have those dates in the next few days, actually. When we follow up, we're going to send each of you the link to this session. One deliverable we'd like to ask of all of you, can you share this session with 10 inclusive influencers that each of you know? Because we're not going to change the world until we widely distribute these kinds of things. And also, Clay at North Carolina A&T, if you can get this into the hands of the people working with your freshmen, where they can see themselves in all the different people engaging today, you all are the role models. And so one of my goals with Global Minded is, how do we get this in front of all college freshmen, all different backgrounds, so they can start to see this is what incredibly successful professionals look like. And they may not run into those people in their college Zooms and whatever in the next year. So that's the second thing. Third thing is, we have an event tomorrow for higher education with Dr. Ryan Ross, Get Comfortable Being Uncomfortable. And tomorrow's title is Out of the Shadows, Voices. And he's got some incredibly diverse leaders, including like Christina, some of our Native American leaders, other people from the PhD project who are leaders in academia who are of African American background. And I think that'll be an incredible session. And then Monday, we have the Courageous Conversations with Technology. And then December 2nd, Foundations and Funders. So those are some of our upcoming programs. We hope that you'll share this liberally with some of your other folks. We hope you're part of our newsletter, where all the information and sign-up information for these events is listed. And on behalf of all of us at Global Minded, want to thank this incredible panel that Toy put together today and all of your time, and wish you all a really incredible Thanksgiving. And we're very grateful to be able to do equity work with all of you. We feel so committed that at this moment in time, it's time to really change history. And we're going to do that through these networks with each other. So thank you so much. And Celeste will get the link out to all of you. And again, our big request on behalf of this panel is, can all of you who attended share it with at least 10 very influential people in your networks, including your students. So thanks to all of you. Toy, anything else from you?
I think it's very important for the attendees to recognize those on this panel as resources and support for shifting the paradigm and changing the narrative, and that the work it is so far from over, but at least we are addressing it, and we don't mind getting a little uncomfortable in this space. I thank you all, and we'll talk to you soon. See you all. So, oh, Carol, this will become available to everyone, right?
Yes, this link, this recording, Celeste, in the next day or so, by Wednesday morning probably, if not before, we'll give you the link and you can share that out widely, and then it'll be posted on the YouTube 2020 channel, where Toy's other session, Everyone's Not at the Table, is posted, and you can refer other folks to that DE&I content as well. So
what about the chat room? When you all record, do we capture that too? That is such good, all that stuff in there, and I didn't get a chance.
This is the most chatted chat we've ever had. We've done like 90 of these. So we've had the most feedback today. That I think is an excellent indicator of a fabulous panel. You got people going. So yes, we'll make sure that that is captured when that's turned out. And then maybe Toy, for some of the Q&A that we weren't able to answer, if you want to kind of answer a few of those, we can put all of those in the summary, along with any other articles you guys want to share for people who want to advance the ball between now and when they see you guys again in January.
All right, that's the main thing, because there's some good stuff in here that is worth sharing. I don't want to lose it. I don't want anyone who attended to think that not responding to this, you know, you all were chatting real time and we weren't always able to read it, but I'm going through this stuff. I'm like, we had some serious hitters in our audience, and they were not.
That's a new standard. That's a new standard for our webinars. I just got to tell you.
Yeah. This is good. And they were brave. Somebody actually asked the question, basically, okay, so now what how do we close this discrimination? How do we use the internet to close some of this discriminatory gaps? And that might be that's a wonderful topic in and of itself.
Topic for January.
All right. Thank you so much,
Great.
Calvin. I
Thanks,
gotta call you.
everybody.
Thank
Have
you,
a
Paul,
wonderful
everybody.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah, pleasure meeting you.
Take care,
Pleasure
everyone.
meeting all of you.
Bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye.